everyone, it's Lisa from Been There, Got Out, and today's guest I just learned is a fellow New Yorker, but he happens to live in California right now. So I am going to be bringing on Joe Dillon. He is a mediator, and he already knows that a lot of you who might be listening now or later are only dealing with extraordinarily high conflict people, and he knows that a lot of people here don't think that it's going to work because it's dangerous, or I'm scared, or my ex never listens to anybody and no one can make any decision. So I think it will be interesting to hear from someone who basically works in the trenches of family court that mediation can be very effective. And here he is. We want you guys to stay out of court, and when it comes to negotiation, being very strategic and mediating properly. So Joe, just turn your camera around, and but I'm glad I can see. There you are.
There we go. I got to just get all my headphones and earbuds and all that stuff together, right? There we go.
That's okay, as long as we can hear you. It's great. So, I was saying we're going to be talking about mediation. I know we might have a very hesitant, doubtful audience, but in our experience, exclusively dealing with high conflict cases, we found certain mediation to be extraordinarily effective. So, before you even introduce yourself, Joe, what percentage would you say is mediation a better option than litigation?
Wow. If answer that question, I'd probably say like 90 to 95%, right? If people are willing to disclose and willing to engage in a good faith negotiation, no matter how high conflict you are, how angry you are, mediation can work. It's when you get people who are dissipating assets, hiding money, abusive, be that emotionally, physically, financially. That's really when you need the protection of that courtroom, that lawyer, that judge, and unfortunately, we see about 2% of cases go to litigation, right? So that tells me that if you're willing and able, 98% of the folks out there could actually wind up mediating, or if nothing else, engaging in a collaborative divorce, right? Where they work with attorneys in real time, but rather than get in front of a judge and really battle it out.
Yeah, and even those cases you mentioned, those are the only cases that we deal with, and we still find that depending on the situation, many of them do really, really well outside of court. Because even if you're dealing with domestic violence, it's not really fair that you should be limited only to litigation, because that costs a lot more money and you have a lot less power. So we always say it's worth a try. A lot also depends on your own perspective and your attitude going in. And if you go in and already say it's not going to work, then it's probably not going to work. So, but this isn't about me talking. Joe, how about you officially introduce yourself and say who you are?
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I really appreciate it. I'm Joe Dillon. I'm a divorce mediator and the founder of Equitable Mediation Services. We practice in 6 states here in the U.S. I have a little unusual path here. My background is actually, I have an MBA in finance and negotiation. So I deal with a lot of people with complex financial situations, financial infidelity, financial abuse, things like that. My parents are actually a great example of what not to do, because they did litigate their divorce. And so they were beyond high conflict, to the point that my dad was restrained in the courtroom because I think he was going to go after the judge because he didn't like the amount of child support that the judge was dictating. And so I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched this unfold. That was a lot of fun. And so, viewers out there, lesson to you: if you have kids, A, don't bring them to court. Really bad idea, scarred for life. But also, you can do this in a better way, right? And that's kind of what we're trying to emphasize here, is that no matter how angry you are, how high conflict you are, the whole idea is to just get through this process so you can start that emotional healing and that financial healing and move on with your lives. And if you've got kids, be better co-parents. So that's kind of how we try to bring it at Equitable Mediation. We try to emphasize that says, look, no matter how you guys feel about each other, let's help you move forward. And that's really how we try to posit our cases into our clients.
Yeah. So let's say you've got a person who's dealing with a very difficult ex and you have them in mediation. Are there things that you as a mediator do differently with cases like ours?
Yeah, certainly. So, when you've got folks who are, amicable, for example, it's easy enough for them to get along and to communicate directly and, decide things together, right? In high conflict cases, what we try to do is we try to do a lot more, shall we say, options creation, because sometimes people will get so mired down in a detail that a conversation will spiral off track. And so rather than deciding right there in real time, one of the things I'll do is I'll create a number of options with them. I'll say, okay, you have a house. What do you want to do with the house? So, for example, I know there are 7 different ways you can handle the house in a divorce. A lot of people don't think of that, right? And so I'll say, okay, in your situation, does this make sense? Does this make sense? And we'll limit it down to maybe 2 or 3. And then I'll say, okay, you two, I want you to independently go away and think about these options and prioritize. Because what a lot of times happens, Lisa, people don't realize they might actually be more in agreement than they realize it. It's just that they're so angry at each other, right? I hate to use this phrase. We in our profession call it, you're in violent agreement, right? It's like, what an oxymoron, right? It's like a terrible way to say that, but it's because you're screaming so much at each other, you can't hear that, yeah, you both want to sell the house, right? So when we get them to do that independently and they come back and then we lay their choices up on the screen, we use a lot of Zoom, put it up on the screen and go, well, your number one choice is sell the house, and your number one choice is sell the house. I guess we have agreement, right? And
It
we
sounds
move
like a
on.
game show.
It absolutely is, and
Survey says.
it's weird, right? Because as I told you, my background's in negotiation. I've been studying negotiation for about 30 years now. And there's a reason they call negotiation game theory. That's the phrase. It is in a way a strange dysfunctional game, right? And so not that divorce is a game by any stretch, but you've got to be thinking about choices and options and winning and losing and giving and getting. And so that's a lot of that. That's how we do it, is we try to get people to avoid the conversation in the session, go away, think about what they want, put all the stuff that they agree to in the corner, because usually a lot of these people agree on most things, they just don't realize it, and then spend our time on the 1 or 2 or 3 issues that might really upset their apple cart. So that's kind of how we would do.
Yeah, and when you talked about, I love that phrase, being in violent agreement. So we work a lot with our clients in strategic communication and negotiation in writing before they even get before a professional. And
Yep.
one of the things that's kind of the backbone of the communication is something we call the universal agreement. And that's just what you're saying. It's that we both want the same things, and we always try to align it with some value of the court. But for example, neither of you wants to waste a ton of money, even though one person probably doesn't care. They're not going to say, yeah, I want to waste money. So if you get something where, like, I'm sure both of us want to save money, and we know that this process can help us do so rather than just going to litigation, most people won't say, no, I don't care about money. I mean, we know
Right.
they don't, but they're not going to say
Exactly.
it. So you kind of
Yeah.
anchor them to, like, we both want to save money, right? Okay, then let's keep doing this instead of just jumping into the courtroom.
Yeah, absolutely. As a negotiator, one of the things that you do is you always ask questions you already know the answer to, right? You don't want to be surprised as the negotiator. And so by gaining some momentum, for example, I'll ask someone, do you love your kids? What are you going to say to that? No,
Right,
they're
right, right.
terrible little children. No, good. So we have agreement that you both love your kids. Great. Look at us agreeing, right? You build up on the smallest things so
Right.
that there creates some goodwill, there creates some momentum. And to your point, right, when we talk about money, something to say is now, okay, it's now, Johnny, Alicia, whatever your child's name is, right? It's their graduation day senior year. And you're standing there with them. You say to them, look, I'm so sorry we had all this money in a 529 for you and we were going to pay for your whole college education. But we chose to litigate our divorce and spend the $200,000. And so now you're going to have to mire yourself in loans and get a job and apply for grants and scholarships. And so sorry about that, right? And you try to put people in that space in the future to say, I can tell you from personal experience, this is what will happen. It happened to me. So don't think you're going to be different, right? And if you can get people out of the current space and thinking about the down the stream impact, that also helps a lot with high conflict.
Yeah. One of the things I remember from my own experience in mediation years ago, at the very beginning of my divorce, was the mediator served as this sort of authority figure, almost like he was the one who would say what the judge would say. So, for
Yep.
example, when my ex said something like, I don't think I should pay any child support unless the kids and I have a great relationship. The mediator said, that's not going to fly at all in court,
Yeah,
so let's come up with a number. Now, had I said that myself, he wouldn't have listened, but I really liked having someone there who had that authority, but still wasn't forcing anyone to do anything specific,
right.
but could kind of guide. Can you talk a little bit about your role?
Absolutely. So people ask me like, what is your role? And I think of my role as part guide, part referee, and part cheerleader. So if you break that down, right, when you think about it as a guide, you say, well, yeah, I'm experienced in these issues in these particular locations. So for example, I grew up in northern New Jersey in Manhattan. And so, I'm familiar with New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So we mediate in those three states, among others, right? So I'm in a New Jersey divorce case, and I say, well, guys, this is how the guideline works. I can't guarantee what a judge is going to say, but is there any good reason that you have here that is going to have the judge go, oh, yeah, you're right. You can ignore the guideline. I'm not seeing it, right? So as the guide, you're not telling them, but you're just sort of using your experience, right? The other thing being a referee is in situations, to use your example, I get that a lot. Well, we decided, or I decided I'm not paying child support. Well, that's great that you decided it, but you're not the authority, right? And so now, as the referee, I have to enforce the rules, right? I blow the flag, blow the whistle, throw the flag. And then as the cheerleader, you're trying to also encourage people to keep engaged, to keep talking, to keep being involved. Because as we know, right, and what you do professionally, it's like their communication has been dysregulated. Either they're ignoring each other or they're screaming at each other. There aren't many conversations. And that's what my house was. It was periods of intense screaming and then months of silence, right, with my
Mm.
parents. So as the cheerleader, you've got to keep them positive, keep them engaged, keep them talking, right? And by doing that and seeing that they understand what the rules of engagement are, they understand how this thing might shake out, you can convince them, why bother go getting that answer when I'm giving it to you now as part of the process, right?
For less
And
money.
it's a delicate, like, gentle reeling in the fish kind of thing, so yeah, so it's definitely a tricky balance.
Yeah. Now, speaking of rules, that's something I remember from when I used to teach high school. In the first week of school, I was like, we're going to come up with some class rules. Instead of me dictating, let's figure it out together. And you
Yep.
know, as well as I do, and most people listening, is how things can get very intense. And sometimes the process gets deflected because somebody wants to blame about why we're here and how this happened and all the other things that the
Yep.
person did wrong. How do you deal with someone who keeps shifting the spotlight from progress to the past?
That's a great question. So to your point, I was never a high school teacher, but I apparently engage in the same process you do. Before we even mediate, we have a 1 hour strategy session with our clients where we lay down the rules and we put up on the screen. We have a series of rules that talk about, number one, the difference between mediation and therapy, right? And so we show them the differences. And as we like to say in our line of work, mediation is therapeutic, but it is not therapy, right? We want you to have a cathartic moment, come to agreement, and move forward. One of the key tenets of mediation is it's a forward looking process. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a favorite quote by a gentleman named Bird Baggett, and it goes like this, and I put this up on the screen. View life through the windshield, not the rear view mirror. Okay. And so that's always our totem, right? That's always that. So that's number one. We then talk about the rules of engagement and mediation, taking notes, confidential, be respectful, dot, dot, dot. Then we talk about the role of attorneys, right? Because in high conflict cases, there may be a need to involve attorneys outside the process after it's over. We say to our clients, we don't require you to have an attorney, but we highly encourage you to have one if you feel the need. And in a lot of these high conflict cases, the need does arise because you don't want there to be any impropriety or any power imbalance, right? So as part of that, I had a therapist colleague. So I taught mediation with a friend, a colleague at Northwestern University in Chicago. And she was an experienced therapist, like 40 years in the business. And she would say to her mediation clients, this sounds like an old argument. How has that been serving you? Right. And it's like really a little mind shift, right? It's like, Has this gotten your relationship on track by having this argument? Has this improved your lives in any way? Do you feel better about yourself every time you have this argument or talk about this past thing? And of course, they're going to say no, right? They're not going to, yeah, this is fantastic. I love this.
Well, one person
Okay,
loved it
well,
probably.
yeah, so okay, maybe this isn't serving us. Why don't we try to move forward, right? And that's the focus, is constant moving forward. That's my job, is to help you negotiate and craft an agreement that's going to govern your co-parenting and your financial relationship, what I call day zero, moving forward. And if we can keep you focused on that, then you have an excellent chance, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So the other thing is that I think people also have in their ideas that they go to one mediation, and if everything's not resolved, then it's a failure.
I know, right? It's like, for us, to give you an idea, right? A lot of the cases we work with are longer term marriages, more complex financial, 20-year marriages, things like that. I said, okay, you guys, you've been married 20 years, let's say. You probably were dating for some period prior to that. So you have managed to create these legal and financial and emotional entanglements for, let's say, 25 years. Do you really think it's going to take 2 hours to unwind that? Like, let's just be honest here, right? We have a lot to unpack. And for our clients, usually in a high conflict situation, you're probably looking at, and our mediation sessions are 2 hours. I would say you're looking at probably anywhere from 5 to 8 sessions of 2 hours each, plus the 1 hour strategy. So you've got to be willing to say, I got to be able to at least put in a full workday to engage in this. And as I remind clients, I'm like, if you're waiting for a judge or a court or your lawyer's schedules to sync up, you're looking at 2 to 3 years. If you're meeting with me 5, 6, 7 times every other week, you're looking at 2 to 3 months. And I don't know about you, but if I'm mired in this dysfunction or this pain and this suffering, I want to get out of it as soon as I can. Right? So you have to be willing to put in the time to do the work, because guess what? You're paying the lawyers and their paralegals and all that money to go get your tax returns and go get your bank statements. I can give you a list, and on a Saturday afternoon, you can do it for free, right? And so go do it. Give it to me, right? Do the work. So you need to be willing to do the discovery, do as I ask, and engage in the sessions on a regular basis.
Yeah. Now you said your sessions are 2 hours. That was what my sessions were. And
Yeah.
some of my favorite mediator friends also say that they should be short sessions, like 2 hours. But sometimes our clients are stuck in these, and I had this once, which was a complete waste of time, like 9 hour me and plus mediation sessions. Why do you do 2 hours versus like the full day?
Yeah, so we had dabbled with full day, right? And sometimes that works for people who travel a lot, but it really only works if they're amicable and they're prepared, right? Because if you got one shot, right? And so in your world and our world, it's like divorce by its very nature is a conflict, right? Like by definition, we don't want to be married, or one of us doesn't want to be married. So having a full day session, it's exhausting for both the people and the practitioner,
Mhm.
because I know that my clients are counting on me to be my very best, and I take my job very seriously, right? Because I want to be there for you. I need to be that strong, presence, that guide, that authority figure, that emotional support for you, because you're going through a really tough time. But I'm a human, right? After 3, 4 hours, five, this piles up on me as well, right? And there does come a point of diminishing returns. When people ask us that, I ask them this question. I say, so I like to go to the gym, right? That's how I blow off steam. And every person who's a personal trainer, physiologist, whatever will tell you, you go to the gym for like an hour. And then when you've broken your muscles down because you've lifted all the weights, the growth happens in the rest period, when you're asleep that night and when you're relaxing tomorrow, right? The growth doesn't happen in your 6th hour of bench presses. You're just hurting yourself at that point, right? So we feel like 2 hours is really, it's enough to have good momentum, good progress, have some warm up, recap, substantive progress, cool down, what do we do next session? And then it keeps people in a good meter. And I think it helps them also because we can take a break at the 1 hour mark. You can get a coffee, you can go for a walk, do whatever you need to do. And we've noticed that that's the magic number for us. We've tried shorter, we've tried longer. 2 hours seems to work the best.
Oh, I love the analogy with the gym. It makes so much sense. Now, I'm thinking about a situation that's happening with a client where they went to mediation, they agreed on a few things, but they didn't flesh out the details of a full parenting plan. We like to work with deadlines, consequences, enforcement language, closing up all the loopholes. And our client's attorney said, you have to sign this mediation thing that's like skeletal. And I'm
Right.
thinking, when are we going to get the parenting plan? Like, we can't use what was the mediation agreement, which they did agree to like four big things, but that, like, how do you deal with that? I mean, I know that mediators write up something, but when can we get the full document? And it was like there's this catch 22, because if the client signs it, then maybe they're stuck with just that. And
Right.
if she doesn't, then she has to go to court. So how do
Right.
we handle that?
Yeah, so a good mediator, and I like to think of myself as one of those, is not going to let you get out of session until you have a fully fleshed agreement. And the way we tend to write our agreements, and again, a lot of the way mediators handle, every mediator has a different personality. And I like to use a little bit of kind of levity to diffuse that kind of tension. And so what I'll say to people, I'm saying, listen, I'm a nervous person. I worry about you when you're gone. Do this for me. Could you just flesh this out with me, right? Like you lay the Italian guilt on him, right? You're just like, just do it for me, okay? Just if you're not going to do it for yourself, just please, so that I can sleep tonight. Because I truly am the kind of person. 4 in the morning, my wife will be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "They didn't finish the parenting plan." She's like, "What are you? It's 4 in the morning. What are you talking about?" I'm like, "I'm worried. I'm very worried." And so we get it into that place because I say, and then also I like to poke a little fun at myself. I say, you know what? You know what would make me happiest is if when we're done with mediation, you never look at this document again because you're co-parenting so well that you don't need to turn to page 12 and see that it's 5:15 and I'm supposed to be at the McDonald's dropping the kids off. Like that's my dream is to to basically make myself obsolete, right? And
Yeah.
they kind of get a kick out of that, but that is the truth is that look, flesh it out. It's there if you need it. You'll save yourself time, money, and heartache. If you don't need it, awesome. Stick it in the filing cabinet. My wife was divorced before, so one day we were moving and I'm going through the safe and all the papers, what do we have to take? And I'm like, oh my God, here's your divorce decree 20 years ago. She's like, oh, I was wondering where that thing was,
That's
so that's what my
amazing.
goal will be for people.
That's amazing.
But yeah, you got to flesh out the details because guess what? Life changes. New people come involved. I know it's not easy to see that right now, but you try to explain to people like, listen, not to be callous or flip about it, but my hope is that this too shall pass and you will find happiness, and perhaps that will be with someone else. And so you're going to want to know if it's Thanksgiving and I get involved to my new spouse's paramour's house and they live 400 miles from here. Do I have the kids on Thanksgiving? When does Thanksgiving start and end? Do I have to travel on Thursday morning or can I travel on Tuesday afternoon? These are important details that should be in these kinds of plans and throughout the agreement for all the topics. So I'm a big believer in details.
Yeah, yes. This is so helpful. When you were talking about having it in your filing cabinet, I was going to say, remember this audience, they all have it like attached to their laptop. It's on the
Right.
desk next to them.
Yeah. Yeah. My hope
It's
is
not
that one
gathering
day
dust.
you'll be like, what's this? Right?
I know.
Fingers
I wish.
crossed.
I wish. Yeah, that would be amazing. All right. So also, Joe, you talked about things that people can do um, by themselves ahead of time to prepare properly for mediation.
Yep. Yeah. So a lot of times, you go out on the internet and you find all these like, checklists, right? Look at the tax returns and all this stuff. It's like, okay, you can gather documents. If that makes you feel better, that's great. The challenge with that is if you're in a high conflict situation and someone, I don't want to say catches you, but that's probably the right word in this situation, finds you asking for pay stubs or tax returns, that may derail progress and that may actually harm things more than it'll help things. What you can do, however, I'm a firm believer in budgets. All right. So, number one is budgets because a lot of times when people go into negotiation, And I say to them, I was like, you're engaging in what invariably will be the single most important negotiation of your life, because what you do now is going to impact you for the rest of your natural born life, right? So wouldn't you want to take time to get prepared and know what it is you are going to ask for? Now, as a finance person, I take this I'm a little wonky this way, but if you go in a negotiation, right, think of a little kid, right? So now you've got a little kid and they're like, I want to eat 20 cookies. And as a parent, you're like, no, you can't do that. What's the first question out of their mouth? Why? Right? Because I said so. Why this, right? We're all hearing it in our head like, oh God, right? Because now instead of being able to say because I said so, why are you asking for $5,000 a month in alimony?
Mhm.
Because I prepared a budget, and if you're going to buy up a house and I need to rent an apartment, here's the cost for a 3 bedroom that's in the same school district. Here's how much my car payment is. Da, 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 da. So, okay. So what you're doing is you're removing the emotions from the conflict and you're using data. Because in a high conflict situation, it's going to be, you always spent my money. I love that one.
Mhm.
It's like, you're doing this, you're wasteful. This, no, well, here's the data, right? Here it is. So then when you're having these conversations, this is why I need this much child support. This is why I need this much in alimony. Same with property division, right? We decided, or I decided, you hear these stories all the time. Oh, I decided I'm going to keep the house. It's like, well, what does that mean to your entire financial picture, right? Don't make these decisions in a vacuum. Another thing is make a list of all your assets and all your liabilities. Because again, you're going to want to go into the situation and remove the emotion from the conflict and be
Mhm.
able to negotiate as a business transaction, right? And you hear the message, right? A high conflict divorce, emotions are the oxygen that feeds the fire. You remove the emotions, you kind of remove some of the oxygen, and then the flames kind of lower. And really what we're talking about is we're coming down to a negotiation. What will you get? What will I get? What will you give? What will you give? And then that's how we help high conflict people move forward. Because go ahead, you don't believe me? Go on apartments.com, search 3 bedroom apartments in our town, knock yourself out. And that's as the mediator will say, and please come back next session and tell me what you found for 3 bedroom apartments if you disagree with, your specs, right? So you see, the idea is data, information, not making emotional decisions, but rather data driven, analytical. I know it sounds a little cold and callous, but we're trying to get through this process, right? And trying to take the emotions out of it. And to me, that's the best way you can do it.
Yeah, and what you're saying kind of aligns with what we do in a different way with our clients, where we also tie it to a best interest or a custody factor, which is the reason you need to figure out that data is you're thinking about your kids in terms of their routine. So if they've been going to the same school for all these years, then you have to live in the same area, right? Because if you don't, that's going to disrupt their routine. So how are we going to make this work?
Right, right. And that's the key, right? We're in this together, whether we want to be or not. We are married. We are still legally bound to each other. We are still parents, right? Like, and that's what you see a lot of when in high conflict cases. A lot of that conflict, in my experience, comes from one person wants the divorce and the other one doesn't. And
Mm-hmm.
so the what we call reluctant spouse digs in and makes it as difficult as possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they're like, well, you want the divorce, you figure it out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so as the guide and the cheerleader, right, you're trying to engage them because you try to say to them, look, isn't it in your best interest also to ask for what you want and to get what you want and you need? So we kind of need to know what that is. Otherwise, you're going to have something dictated to you, especially if you wind up in court, right? People think judges, like, I don't know what they think about judges, but judges are people, right? They just decide things. And I've had many friends go through divorces. I've had people who've litigated, my family included. It's completely arbitrary. Sure, there are guidelines and rules and laws and all that stuff, but guess what? The judge has a lot of discretion. I'm in California, for example. The judge can decide that we're not going to put a duration on alimony if you've been married 10 years or more, and you're going to come back and it's going to end when I say so. What? Right? Like, do
Yeah.
you really want that? I wouldn't, right? So engaging people and trying to get them in that process, that to me also is a way of kind of helping people, like you said, we, us, how do we solve this together, right? So, it's not easy to get people engaged, but by explaining to them the downside, like, you're going to have a settlement dictated to you or you're going to waste a lot of money, that definitely helps in these kinds of high conflict situations.
Yeah, and what you described with the judge, I always think of it like the Wizard of Oz. You're going in, you're Dorothy, that's the wizard. You don't get to decide
Right.
once you're in there. And I know a lot
Yeah.
of people say the system has to change, the system has to change. Well, the system is not going to change anytime soon. So
Right.
one of the options is to try to stay out as much as possible and to realize it
Exactly.
is a process. It's not something like you went a couple times and it didn't work.
Right. Yeah.
It's
And that's it. It's like you're you got yourself into this, so get yourself out of it, right? That's really the idea. It's like, you say, been there, got out. It's, yeah, but you have to have a role in it. You can't just sit there and like fold your arms and hold your breath and, pout or whatever. You're an adult, right? You were an adult enough to get married, an adult enough perhaps to have children. So now you need to be adult enough to end your marriage, to move forward with your life. And I remind people at the end of the day, as a mediator, again, like I say, I try to use a little levity. I said, you know what my number one goal in mediation is? And forgive me for saying it as direct. It's to piss both of you off slightly. I said, if both of you are slightly angry with me when this is over, I've done my job, right? That's the God's honest truth. If one of you says that was the best divorce ever, chances are the other one is like, that guy really screwed me, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
at the end of the day, my best hope is that both of you are slightly upset with me. And that's the process, right? And that's it. So engage with me, help me do this, right? Get through this process, right? Put your emotions aside. I know it's easier said than done, but working with folks like you, working with therapists, working with divorce coaches, divorce and the mediation process or the litigation process is not the time to do the emotional thing, right? There are professionals who help you with that. Folks like you, folks like coaches, folks like therapists deal with the emotions outside of the process the best you can so that you can come into the process, calm and centered. Easier said than done, but even if you improve it that much, that increases your chances of avoiding litigation.
yeah.
So
And you have a question now. It says, does a judge, when they decide to take into consideration what you agreed to, does a judge take into consideration what you agreed to in mediation when they make a decision?
it's funny. So, like, I've never been divorced in a court before, but a lot of this stuff, if people, we say to them, look, if you've agreed to stuff in mediation, the whole idea is not to blow that up, right? We're really narrowing it down. And as you move through the process, think of it like a funnel, right? In mediation, we're up here. We want to get you to here, right? We want to get you there. So that's the one thing you're focusing on in court if you wind up there, right? It's like, I don't think a judge has any interest in blowing anything up, right? If people have agreement, and in fact, what's interesting is, so states like New Jersey, right? They have something called an early settlement panel, where if you can't work it out in private mediation and you try to engage with the court system, well, guess what? You're going to what's called court-ordered mediation in our shorthand, right?
Hmm.
And it's three people, usually a lawyer, parenting coordinator, mental health, maybe a finance person, maybe two lawyers, people who work in the courts, volunteer and do this. And my understanding is that if you go in front of these folks and you've got, let's say you never went to mediation, this is your first go at it. If they make a recommendation, more often than not, the judge is going to take that recommendation.
Hmm.
So even if you're unhappy with what they said, I've had friends who have done this. They've gone, they've said, this is terrible. They try to get in front of the judge, and the judge is like, why are you here? I'm going to just agree with what the early settlement panel said. So if there's nothing else, can we move on with our day, right? And I think people also, Lisa, they're upset to find out that it's not that the legal system doesn't care about you, but it's a system, right? It's filled with people doing the best they can. But guess what? By recent accounts, and I talked to a lot of professionals, so I have a colleague in Washington, and she said post-pandemic, the court system is down 40% in terms of their employees. They just never came back. So
Hmm.
they were already short-staffed. Now they're down another 40%. Do you think these people want to listen to you bitch and moan about how you left the toilet seat up? No, they're overwhelmed. They just want to go home and have dinner, right? And so you got to remember that your conflict, while it may seem like the world to you, as you move through the process, like you said, the process is what it is. It's designed to just get the stamp on the paper, send the docket down the hall, bring in the next case, because don't forget these judges, a lot of them are being judged, pardon the pun, on how many cases they move through the system. That's how they get promoted. That's how they get raises. That's how they get, shown as being successful. And so their goal is to just move you through, right? And they're the nicest, most caring people I know, because God, I could never do that all day sitting in front of people, right? But it's the system is stacked the way it is, and like you said, your best bet is to stay out of the system. So
Right, because
that's
they
what I
want you out. And if you go, they're going to probably order you to at least try, right? So that should be
absolutely.
part of your plan is to start with mediation, because even if you start with litigation, a judge is going to say go to mediation anyway first.
Yep. Yeah, I say see me now or see me later, your choice.
Right.
Right? That's it. You can see me now while you have a screaming chance and you haven't, you know, spent this money and screamed and yelled at each other for the past 6 months, 2 years, or you're going to get kicked back here anyway. So we might as well start here, And that's the beauty of mediation, right? Is that, in high conflict situations, people feel comfortable knowing that give it a shot. It's like if it doesn't work out, you can always go to the next step, right? You can always escalate to lawyers or to collaborative to litigation, right? You can always go there. And what's the worst thing that happens, right? So, I've got clients here and there where it's like, look, you guys, I know you didn't get all the way, but take a look at all the things you did agree, right? Some really thorny, sticky issues. Don't throw that away. You got a parenting plan, you got a child support, you got it. All you're arguing over is the 401k. Okay, you couldn't figure it out here, no problem. Limit it to this one issue. Don't rip the band-aid off and suddenly, you're trying to dress the wound again. Like take the stuff you've got, and that's what I'll do is I'll write up mediator notes to say, in mediation, the parties, everything's tentative, of course, but this is what they discussed. Here's how they got here. Here's what they agreed to. Here's the process we used to get them there. And, my hope is that they're not blowing the whole thing up, right? Is that, of course, anyone can do anything. But it's smart couples, high conflict couples, smart enough to put the emotions aside and be able to say, look, let's just get through this. So even if it's so I can get away from you and you can get away from me, great. Use your anger as motivation then. Just go on and move forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, can you tell people, Joe, how to find you? I know you're in California, but you said you practice in different states and do a lot on Zoom.
Yeah. So here's a fun fact about us. I think we were accidentally, if not the first, but one of the first practitioners to mediate online. We started in 2011.
What?
And in
Wow.
2011, remember, in 2011, we had WebEx and telephones. We didn't really
Yeah.
have cameras and, high bandwidth and all that. And it started actually with a couple. A gentleman called us, and his wife was agoraphobic, afraid to leave the house. And he's like, we really want to mediate, but she won't leave the house. She's OCD, afraid of germs, other foreign
Mhm.
environments. Is there anything you can do to help us? And I'm like, well, I said, if she's afraid of germs, me coming to your house, the guy actually happened to live like 15 minutes from where we lived. I
Mhm.
would say I'd offer to come to you, but she's probably not going to want me in the house, right? So I said, well, what about this? So I came in, my wife is my partner, Cheryl. She's our divorce coach. And I said, Cheryl, what do we do here? She's like, well, we could try this new thing called screen sharing, and so we made up these little slides in PowerPoint, these little Excel spreadsheets, and we worked on the telephone. I shared my screen and we mediated and it worked. It was clunky, I will totally admit that. But over the last now 14 years, we've honed our process. We do 100% online, and we practice in Washington, California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So the best thing to do, anybody watching this, is go to equitablemediation.com. So that's our website, just like our company. Be careful not to type in meditation. A lot of people do that. Equitable mediation. We could use a little meditation here, but equitablemediation.com. And we're big believers in knowledge. We think knowledge is power. We think educated clients are good clients. And so if you get to the homepage in the button, you'll see it says Learning Center. So go to the Learning Center, tons of blog posts, podcasts. There's a free video course, other courses. We just want you to get educated, just learn, get the knowledge, but always work with a professional. That's what please, please, please. I've been doing this 28 years. It's like we go to school, we live, we eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, right? So get educated to a point, but then definitely rely on professionals to take you the rest of the way. So go to equitablemediation.com. If you're in one of our states, you can click the little button that says talk to us. You can schedule a free call with our divorce coach, my wife Cheryl, see if mediation works for you. And as what you'll learn about me, I'm a real straight shooter. And if it's not going to work, I'm also going to let you know that. I don't want to waste your time or money with me, right? I want to help, but if I truly believe in my heart of hearts I can't, then I am going to refer you to someone. So it's sort of like, what have you got to lose?
Yeah, love it. And being blunt is what we do too. We call it the harsh New York reality check, and you're a fellow New Yorker transplanted. But
Yep.
yeah, but that's really helpful because it's saving people time, money, and energy. But
Right.
thank you so much, Joe, for
Thank
coming on and
you.
talking about this. I got like all kinds of little ideas and things, and I'm going to do a little commercial after this to review some of the things we talked about. But this is very, very helpful.
Great. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I know it's a tough time, but this too shall pass, right? You just have to remember, I am strong. I will get through this, and I'll come out better on the other side. I know it's devastating when you're in the middle of it, but just hang in there, stay strong, stay focused, and work with folks like you to get through the process and build a better life on the other side. That's all.
Yes, yes, for sure. All right. Well, thanks again, Joe, and let's definitely keep in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.